Austin, really good to see you. Today, we are talking about three retirement risks that could cause you to run out of money, which is, of course, the number one fear among retirees. Life expectancies are at all time highs. Today, a couple age 65 has a 50% chance of living beyond 90, which is why the first risk is known as longevity risk.
Yes, Aaron, to your point, longevity risk is simply exactly what it sounds like, right? The risk that we outlive our money and live longer than perhaps we are anticipating. So, with this next chart, what we're looking at here is you could, and you can see on the chart, right? You could, as a 50% chance, if you're age 65, at least one spouse is going to live to over 90. So,
Wow.
this is really, again, this is the reality of what we're facing today. So we need to plan for this, right? And when we
Mhm.
begin this planning process, what we typically do is we like to stress test our retirement plans. And one thing we stress test against is longevity risk. So what does our plan look like if we live 5 years longer or 10 years longer, right? This is the reality of what could be. So we need to plan for this ahead of time and not get
Mhm.
caught, say, at age 80 and say, whoops, now I have to go back to work, because
Yeah,
obviously nobody wants to do that.
exactly. You want to be celebrating a longer life, not be stressing about it. Good point. All right. Risk number two, changes to Social Security. It is very likely benefits or qualifications will have to change. And I was really surprised to learn that among those who rely on Social Security, that benefit makes up 50% of their income.
Yeah, Social Security really is such a big part of many retirees' income plans. So we know the fiscal health of the United States is not in very good shape, specifically Social Security. The
Right.
most recent trustees report states that the trust fund is scheduled to run out of money in 2033, and at that point, current FICA tax revenue will be able to support approximately 75% of benefits. In other words, a 25% cut to benefits. So, with this in mind, we need to be thinking about where do we get income from? How do we generate income in today's environment? And be potentially planning for this reduced Social Security benefit amount.
Right.
Again, it comes back to proactive planning and doing this on the front end for these potential eventualities.
Good point. All right. Risk number three, inflation. Again, I feel like we're always talking about it, but high inflation simply means that you will have to use more of your retirement savings to maintain your quality of life.
Exactly, Aaron. And boy, does this one hit home recently, right? We know
Right.
over the last 12 months, inflation has soared to 40-year highs. And this is something that affects everybody, right? None of
Mhm.
us can escape this inflation. And really, how we protect against this type of risk is really owning things like equities or stocks that appreciate over the long term, right? We need a segment of the portfolio that is going to outpace inflation over a very long period of time. And that's exactly what ownership in stocks does over the long term.
Mhm. So, Austin, you mentioned, of course, these risks are known, which means we can be proactive about this planning. But what are the specific strategies then that address these risks?
Yeah, I think thinking about question number two, right? Social Security, it's very important to be thinking about how and where do we get our income from in retirement? Because for most of our lives, for many retirees, right, it's just been about accumulation. But then we
Right.
have this big pot of money, and how the heck do we turn it into cash flow? And that's really the only thing that matters. So perhaps looking at, you know, income sources such as, perhaps using a portion of your portfolio for a guaranteed income annuity, right? Perhaps
Hmm.
joint life annuity for both you and your spouse, money that you cannot outlive. That builds security into the plan if and should Social Security benefits get cut. And I think number two is this inflation problem. We know that over time, things cost more, right?
Yeah.
There's certainly everything in the world costs more than it did in 1950, and it will cost more in 2050 than it does today. And that's
Right.
just a reality we are all facing. So, again, being sure that we have some portion of the portfolio invested in stocks that will appreciate and outpace inflation over time is really one of the best ways to combat that inflation problem over
Mhm,
time.
mhm. Proactive, not reactive planning. That makes a lot of sense, Austin. And I understand too, of course, the sooner that you can have this conversation with a professional, the better. So, what's the best way to reach you with questions?
Yeah, you can give us a call at 919-322-4113 or send us an email at info@patriotwealthnc.com.
All right, Austin, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.